Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, their first back-to-back of the season, and it's against the Chicago Bulls. The New York Knicks obviously played a fun win in Philly last night. It's always fun to beat those losers over in Philadelphia. I'll just call it like I see it. New York wins, Philly loses. Nice little pattern we've got going here. And now we welcome in a new look Chicago Bulls. The last time the Bulls were in town, the Knicks were playing an overtime win that clinched them both a 50-win season and the 2 seed. Very fun. Game 82 of the regular season is for sure. New look team, no DeRozan, no Alex Caruso, and we'll get to find out a little bit more about this new look Bulls team with, hold on, this is usually where I do this, and it usually works. Will Gottlieb of the CHGO network. A lot of fun things going on at the CHGO network. You tell me, Will, first of all, how you doing? And what's the main focus right now? Is it the Bears? Is it the offseason in baseball? Is it the Bulls? You tell me what's going on.
Well, first of all, great to be back. And just wanted to say congrats on the game theory new role. It's been great hearing you chime in on those episodes. It's one of my go-tos.
Thank you.
So that's really awesome. But yeah, I mean, Chicago's Bears town for sure. I think with all the scrutiny around the offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, getting fired, and Matt Eberflus kind of going downhill as some people predicted it would. So that one's really kind of carrying us, but there's some exciting stuff in Chicago. The teams aren't very good, but we're having a good time covering them. So it's been a lot of fun.
I know the Caleb Williams experience has been up and down. The Hail Mary seems to have turned the Bears season around. I will just say this as a Jets fan, it could be so much worse. Also, just as a New York football fan, it could be so much worse.
I know. I feel like the Bears are the Jets. So
we're
probably in the same boat.
We get comped a lot, the Bears and the Jets, because of the lack of franchise quarterbacks over the years. I mean, really, that's the big comp right there. There's one big Super Bowl that a lot of people talk about in both of our histories between 85 and obviously the Joe Namath Super Bowl. But that is for the CHO Bears.
That's for the CHGO Bears guys.
Yeah. Or the 85 podcast. Great name, by the way, whoever came up with that. We are here to talk about Knicks Bulls. And again, I have no idea what to make of this Bulls team. They seem to have been hovering around. I hope this isn't offensive, but hovering around just like playing status the last couple of years. And then they finally made some moves this year that were towards the future, like Caruso going out, although I think a lot of people were surprised that he didn't net a first. But you got Giddy back, which, I mean, you're investing in him and seeing if you could turn his career around to an extent. Levine back on the court, DeRozan walks. So you tell me, what's the state of the Bulls at the moment? How are fans feeling? How's the team looking?
I think, generally speaking, to your point about just finally making some moves, I mean, this team had been inactive at the trade deadline in 3 straight years. Their biggest free agent acquisition in those 3 years was probably Javon Carter signing for half the mid-level exception. So there just wasn't any sort of excitement. There weren't any real young players like taking steps forward. Obviously, Kobe White had a great year last year, but that was his 5th season. So it's not like he was brand new on the scene. So I think there's a level of excitement of just this team having a little bit of a different identity, and you can really see that reflected in their style of play. So last couple of years, very isolation heavy, very pick and roll heavy, very slow. I believe they were like 28th in pace last year. This year, they are flying up and down the court. They're first in pace. They're shooting a ton of threes. They're getting out in transition. The defense has been kind of, nightmare's probably a little bit too strong considering I think they're still top 20, but just allowing runways to the rim, not really any point of attack resistance after, as you mentioned, Caruso leaves town. So definitely a different team, but as you mentioned, I mean, they still are the 10th seed right now. So I guess no matter what happens, this team is kind of destined for play-in.
So you hinted at or alluded to what I'm actually the most worried about in this matchup, and it's that they're getting up a ton of threes, and the games the Knicks have lost so far this year that really have concerned me the most are the 2 games that they played against Boston and Indiana, 2 teams that just know how to get them up. That's their goal. They play with pace, so that way they can get them up. like taking at least 40 something threes a game. And the Celtics are a different league when it comes to getting.
They're a different animal.
Yeah, they're trying to get to if they take a two, it probably leads to laps in practice. But I look at this matchup, and I mean, I'm actually curious from your perspective. Like, yes, they're getting a ton of threes up. Yes, they're playing with pace to generate those looks, but they're not. Their offensive rating, if I look at it on NBA.com, is still 25th. So that's their defense at the moment. I think their offensive rating right now is I was right, 25th. So
yeah,
it's not necessarily leading to points, but they are getting them up. Is this more like the process is being built at the moment, and eventually these threes will start to fall?
Well, I think part of it is like you look at kind of the difference between what I was mentioning the offense looked like last year, and to me that was very much like the quality of shots that they were getting. Right, it was very efficiency driven. They were trying to win the possession battle, but it wasn't based on like getting a ton of possessions. It was based on high efficiency within that, offensive rebounding, low turnovers. This year, it's been more about the quantity of looks. And so they're getting more shots up. They're not offensive rebounding as much. They're turning it over a lot more, but they're trying to offset that by getting as many shots as they can. And I think the issue has been that there have been so many turnovers and they're giving up so many offensive rebounds that it's hard to win the possession battle when you're just not getting as many shots as your opponent. And that has been a big key for them in their losses, is they've just been giving up way more field goal attempts than whoever they're playing. So I think there's room for improvement there. And I think the turnovers are kind of the low hanging fruit. I mean, you look at the Knicks right now, they're forcing the 28th most turnovers in the league. So bottom 3 in turnover production on their end. And I think that is kind of going to be, for the Bulls, a positive in terms of their ability to just hopefully be able to manage that and actually put themselves in a position to win. Because if you look at their turnovers per game in wins versus losses, it's just dramatic. And to me, I think the kind of story that I've seen so far with this team is like, they're either playing really well and making all their threes and not turning it over, and then they win, or they're turning it over a bunch, they can't hit their threes and they lose. And there's really not a lot of middle ground. Even if it's like for 3 quarters, they look good. In that 4th quarter, they just kind of fall apart because they don't have the ability to play at a slower pace. When you are using your pace and your tempo to manufacture shots, when the game slows down, it just becomes a lot harder to do that efficiently.
Which makes sense. You're not getting extra possessions. You're not getting second chances at, well, I guess when you're losing the possession battle, I should say.
Exactly.
It's just fewer chances to be efficient on that first shot. The great teams that are efficient on their first shot, like we mentioned, the Boston Celtics. I'm not going to put the Pacers in there yet because the hater in me will not allow me to.
But it's the style of play, right?
It is that style of play. Exactly. Yeah. So that's where, the Knicks, I think, are trying to get there. They went from a team that was heavy offensive rebounding with like Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle and Isaiah Hartenstein and really Josh Hart as well, to now a team that's prioritizing its first shot. And they're 4th in offense right now, which that I think would be the thing that gives me any kind of confidence for tonight's game. And I shouldn't say any kind, that gives me confidence for tonight's win. The Knicks are just even on nights like last,
they're a more talented team.
Well, even on nights like last night, where like Cat had a really good first quarter offensively and then didn't shoot it efficiently the rest of the game. He actually probably had his best defensive game of the season last night. I know that Bontemps stat, which isn't real, by the way, has been making its way around the internet, but he also just flatly played better last night defensively, a spirited defensive performance. But like Jalen Brunson didn't have an efficient night. They didn't hit a lot of threes last night, and yet they still won and scored 111 points on the road in Philly. So like on their bad offensive nights, it's still 111 points, So I would say the Knicks coming into this, they're going to ride their offense, hopefully, to a W. I am curious about what's new. I mean, you mentioned Giddy, you mentioned, Levine being back and some of the different play style ways, but is there anything new that Knicks fans can expect? Is there like their rotation? Are they going 9? Are they on the defensive end? Are they playing a lot of drop? Are they switching a little bit more? What can Knicks fans expect tonight that they haven't seen from the Bulls in the past?
I think the pace is the big one. I think, early on in the season and even preseason, they were really going fast. And I think that was affecting teams' ability to like keep up in the fourth quarter, even on the offensive end. So like their offense was, typically it's like you turn your defense into offense. This was like run so fast that it tires the other team out to where they can't play offense in the fourth quarter. And it slowed down from that a little bit. But I think that's going to be a big one. And then, last year when these two teams were playing, it was like Caruso really hounding Jalen Brunson in these pick and roll scenarios. And I think that it's just going to be a lot easier for the Knicks to be able to kind of manipulate some of that stuff. And we saw this in the last game the Bulls played against the Cavs, where they had, a lead late in the third quarter. They were tied until up about 5 minutes to go. But then the Cavs just started picking on Josh Giddy and Vooch in pick and rolls, and there's just no resistance when you do that. And so, to me, it's actually something that I'm really interested in about the Knicks is like, it's atypical for teams to build good defenses when they don't have a premier rim protector or a point of attack defender. And so the Knicks being this team that's kind of got these big switchable wings that can do a lot in terms of like versatility and guarding up and down the lineup, but can that really sustain when teams can just kind of work around that? And so I wonder if the Bulls will try to exploit that. I wonder how other teams have tried to exploit that through the Knicks' first 10 games. But I think for the Bulls, just the defense is not going to be the same. And I think, that's an area where the Knicks can really punish them.
So before I get to the Knicks and we discuss your reaction to the very busy summer that they have, who do you think guards Brunson tonight? You mentioned, obviously, I remember the Caruso battles, but like, who do you think they start off on Brunson with?
It's kind of crazy, but like Zach LaVine has been the perimeter stopper in the starting lineup.
Okay.
The Bulls do play a lot of Ayo Dosunmu. He's, around 30 minutes per game, and he's really their best defensive guard. Dalen Terry has gotten some minutes kind of in the backup point guard role. He's more of like a big wing, but he's a very, aggressive, pesky point of attack defender. So he'll get kind of those backup minutes. But, I think with your running lineup of like Kobe White, Josh Giddy, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic out there, Patrick Williams has started and he's been not as good as he has been historically defensively, but obviously the best, defensive player in that lineup. They just have to find solutions somewhere. And, for now, that has been Zach LaVine. And he's always been a little bit underrated on the ball. I think it's off the ball where he can kind of get distracted or lose focus. But, the Knicks are also so much bigger up and down the wing that I wonder how the Bulls would match up. Maybe it's Kobe. But I think they're going to try to do their best to hide Giddy away from Brunson as best they can.
That makes sense even more so that they're relying a lot on pace, that they're just trying to make sure no defense is set when they get down the court. So that way, if you get in the half court, you're going to have a lot of places to pick on. But if the other team is never set and you're hunting for threes because you're first in pace, as you mentioned, that leads to a recipe for success. So,
and even after made shots, like the Bulls are really running and just trying to beat teams, like you said, so that they're not going up against a set defense every time. I think Nikola Vucevic has been a very maligned player here in Chicago, but he's doing a really good job of kind of keeping the ball moving side to side. I think they're like half court tempo and just beating teams even down the court when they give up an open layup. I think that's been a huge factor for the Bulls in terms of generating offense.
So last question before I transition to some Knicks talk. Just the Giddy experience specifically. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it seems like every time he plays the Knicks, he kills them. So he's actually someone I'm worried about tonight. Like the last two times I think he's come to New York with the Thunder, it doesn't matter what slump he's in. It doesn't matter how poorly he's playing. It doesn't matter how much OKC fans wanted him fired into the sun. He's getting a triple-double or a near triple-double and probably putting the game away in the fourth quarter. I noticed his splits, like shooting 43% from three so far this year. Low attempts, but like that's the realized version of Josh Giddy. Like how satisfied, how happy are Bulls fans with the season so far from Giddy?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends who you ask. I mean, certainly the box score numbers are looking really good, and that was always kind of what people expected. He's, gonna have the ball in his hands a ton. He's a great passer, really, really special in terms of even in the half court, like his ability to just pass guys open has been really impressive to me. And he's a great rebounder, and that's an area where I think the Bulls have struggled at times. So he's putting up the big numbers, but defensively, that has been a real issue. And last game and the game before that, Billy Donovan actually decided to close with Audisumu instead of Giddy. And that was, that's part of the reason why Giddy wanted to be moved from OKC in the first place, was that he was going to be moved into a bench role, was not closing games, was, benched in the playoffs. Like, that stuff takes a hit to your ego. And, he and I have talked about that. He's been very open about that with the media. And so it's been interesting to see how this evolves. I wonder if that will be something that, like, they have to move past, or Billy will have to go back to him, because I think at the end of the day, with his contract being where it is in terms of, his rookie deal coming up and entering restricted free agency, the Bulls really have to know what they have in Giddy before they make an investment in him. And so I think making sure that he's out there in those closing groups to know if that's something that can work or not is really important.
You're hitting on something that's just never factored in by sports fans, by fans in general. The politics of these things, like the lineup decisions, like, it might have been the correct basketball decision to not have Giddy close and have Dosunmu on the floor. There was a game earlier this year where I thought the Knicks should have closed with Deuce McBride over Mikal Bridges because of how well Deuce was playing, how poor Mikal Bridges was playing. But you want to make back page headlines in New York, have the guy that you traded 5 picks for and all the swaps across town not close a game in November, and let that be a story. And it's why, like, Tibbs, the guy that's playing 6-man rotations, although last night he stretched it to 9 last night. Like, you think he wants to win every game. I do think there is a hint of, like, I can't have Mikal not close this early in the season. He does enough good things that even if on a night he's struggling, I have to have him come back in to close. So that
and Tibbs is one of those
just
guys
never factored in, Yeah.
Tibbs is one of those guys where, like, even if a guy's playing bad, he's still gonna have trust in the guys he has trust in. So, like, you're playing regardless of how you're playing. And I think
campaign, high RJ Barrett, high all these different veterans that he's had trust in over the years.
And that can be good for guys because it like they're not in the back of their head, well, I might get benched if I miss this shot, or I mess up this rotation. But also at the same time, like, I think Mikal's jump shot has kind of come back to normal a little bit. You'd be able to tell me better, but it seems like when you're going through something like that, maybe you do need to, like, take a seat and figure it out. So I don't know. That's what you get with Tibbs.
So I haven't looked at the stats yet today. So actually I want to see where Mikal has landed. So Mikal, the preseason stuff where he made like 1-3 in the preseason, and then he had an 0-for-4 first half against the Celtics on national television. Everyone was like, oh my God, they traded 5 picks for a guy with a broken. Right. And then over the next, like, 8 games, he was outstanding, like, was flirting with a 65 true shooting. The last 5 games, he's hit another cold stretch, and he's down to 30% shooting from 3 on 6.5 attempts. So I just think this is what's going to happen. Like, he might start another 5 game stretch tonight where he flirts with a 65% true shooting and gets that back up to 37, which is, like, what you're hoping from him. Like, really good defense and then a 37% 3-point shooter. That's really, like, the goal. Well, I mean, I'd loved him to get to 40, and you didn't trade 5 picks for a guy that's gonna, not be a floor spacer. But I have very few worries about Mikal offensively. If it's game 50 and he's shooting 30% from 3, we have a larger conversation. But
I think the concern will be, like, as a shooter, what you want is a consistent, repeatable motion. And if you're changing that from game to game, like, maybe you find something that works for a few games, but then if you're not sticking with it, if you're not consistent with it, then maybe something gets tweaked, and then you go through a cold spell, and then you got to change it again. And now this cycle of not having this consistent shot, or changing it and tweaking it and then readjusting it and then overcompensating, I think that can be a challenge for shooters. So, I think Mikal's a great player. I'm not super worried about him either, but I can see why in a smaller sample that would potentially look like there's some, up and down trends going back and forth.
We'll see. Speaking of Mikal Bridges, they obviously, as I mentioned, traded 5 picks and 2 swaps for him this offseason. That's all. 5 picks, 2 swaps, Bojan Bogdanovic for just the cherry on top for him this summer. And then they traded for Karl Anthony Towns. When you saw this happening in Chicago, like, what was your perspective? What did you think when the Knicks made those 2 deals?
So with Mikal, I'll start with that one. First of all, I always respect when teams reach a certain level and then understand who they are, what their weaknesses are, and like, can we raise our ceiling a little bit? And so going for it in that scenario, and they had been loading up on draft picks and good contracts to be able to do that kind of thing. I really liked it from kind of a theoretical standpoint. Certainly, like the amount of picks and the cost of it, that was high, but like I kind of think you need to do that for one. I mean, you're paying for the contract that he's on, which is like way under market value, and that allows you to go out and do other things. So that's a factor. And then also obviously the continuity with his Villanova teammates. Like I think that's really important too. And then just the fit. I mean, he's the perfect role player. I mean, he can be a secondary scorer. He can defend. He can be switchable. He can be versatile. I think that kind of player is just really valuable. And so you're also making a trade with your crosstown rival. Like that's probably going to cost you a little bit extra too. So at the end of the day, I think it was a lot, but it kind of made sense why they had to pay that, because otherwise I just don't think the Nets would have done it. And it was beneficial for them too. That allowed them to go get their pick and put themselves in a position to start rebuilding and not cap out kind of in mediocrity, which is where it seemed like they were trending. So obviously an expensive one, but I didn't hate that one. The Cat one was a little bit more surprising. And I think a similar thing where you raise your ceiling, but at what cost? And so obviously DiVincenzo, as you know, was just super impactful. That kind of 3-point volume and accuracy is just super rare. After losing Hartenstein, now you're replacing him with Cat, who's obviously not the same defensive player. But I think from an offensive standpoint, like it just completely changes who you are and what you can be. And so I thought it was a good trade for both teams. Like I like what the Timberwolves did. They got off a lot of money. They got more depth. They got more shooting. And they added someone who can be kind of a secondary offensive hub when Anthony Edwards isn't in the game. And that was what they really missed. So I liked it for both teams. I thought it was pretty expensive. But you get what you pay for. And Cat is an exceptional stretch five. And that really can, like I said, change who you are as an offensive team. So to me, it was all about like, how can they bounce back from that defensively? And I think it's going to take some time for them to get to that point, but just really interested to see what this new look Knicks team looks like after such a successful season. Like it's always a little scary to like say, okay, we made the conference semifinals, we won 50 games, we're the second seed. Now let's totally change who we are and see if Tibbs can figure it out defensively with, a roster that is not as conducive to that.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that it's really tough to build a good defense on the back of a poor rim protector and a poor point of attack defender. And I want to give a shout out to one of my colleagues, my friend XJ, who is very analytically inclined. He does some work for us. He also has a podcast called Hot Hand Theory. And while I don't think either of us would defend his rim protection, and I think Cat is a much worse defender, period, than he does, what argument he would make with how good he is as a defensive rebounder, how elite he is in that area, is that he can still have an impact defensively that leads to winning. Which, if you go by all the LeBron, the Darkos, the EPMs, the very heavy impact metrics, they'll actually point to Cat as an average defender. But all that's saying is that he's having an average impact defensively with how he is with his rebounding. And I don't think the Knicks necessarily, and it's going to be weird with Tibbs to say this, but I don't think they necessarily need to have a good defense. It just can't be an awful defense. And I think,
and that's the offensive ceiling that I'm talking about. Like if you can be that good offensively, then you can get by as a passable defense. And no, I totally agree. I think,
but that's it. Passable is the word. Passable is the word. Not bad. Not bottom
right.
five.
Yeah, you got to actually get there.
15's the number I'm aiming for. Like get to 15th, 16th in defense. And the model is what the Nuggets were when they won the title.
Yep.
Like they were the 15th best defense that year, but the 5th best offense. If that is the model you go to. Now, Cat isn't Jokic, but the way he's played so far, he's actually been pretty good. So I think that's the plan that they're going to this year, is that they're honestly switching up their identity a bit, and they're not going to be this gritty, tough team that it's a battle anytime you're playing the Knicks any night. It's going to be like, oh, can we score with them? And there's going to be teams that can, and you're going to have to need to get a little extra from the Knicks. But it's why like the returns early. The early returns are mixed, but I think the good has just looked so good that you're confident the bad will be less and less bad as they build chemistry throughout the season, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a really underrated element of these kind of deals where you really do shake up your team. Is like it takes a while, I think, more on the defensive end than on the offensive end to get yourself set and to form an identity that you can really stick to on that end. And so, yeah, I would not expect the Knicks defense to look the same today as it does in February. And same for the Bulls. Like the Bulls have had in the past defenses with DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, they were top 5 2 years ago. And obviously a lot of that was Caruso and what he was able to do just on the point of attack and preventing things from happening before they would even, come to fruition. And so I think you need good perimeter defenders, but the Knicks have that too. And I think, you mentioned the Knicks, like their defense has been solid. And I think the Knicks personnel is even better than theirs. So yeah, like you said, I mean, if you can stick with them offensively, that's one thing. But I think the Knicks have, even if it's just for like a fourth quarter or second half of a game, like I think they have the personnel to really lock in, and obviously the game planning and ability to execute that better than most teams with Tibbs.
So one thing I didn't mention or ask when we were talking about the Bulls is Lonzo, and yeah. I'll just be totally honest with you. There are many a Knick fan that is monitoring the Lonzo situation in case the Bulls decide to sell at a certain point this season and put up the white Cooper flag later on this year. But I mean, it's only been 3 games and then he hurt his wrist, but how is he looking? Like back on the court, I think is the win here. So how was Lonzo?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, just to set it up, like he got hurt January 14th, 2022. He had 3 surgeries. He missed over 1,000 total days between his last game and then when he got back on the court. And, he's not the same athlete. Like he was just sensational, like, getting over screens, mixing it up, like just being in passing lanes. He's not that same caliber of athlete, but his IQ is still there. His passing vision is still there. His shooting is still there. It's kind of remarkable how much he still looks like Lonzo. And I think, they're going to be very careful with him in terms of minutes, and obviously comes back and sprains his wrists. But I don't think this is going to be like a long-term thing. I do think he can be back. And like I said, they're going to have to just be very careful with his workload. But it would not surprise me if Lonzo like goes on to play, 15 to 25 minutes a game for several more years in the league, just because of how smart he is and how good he can be as a team defender, as a shooter, as a ball mover. He's really like the perfect role player now as kind of an off guard who can just give you so much on both sides, even without that level of athleticism that he used to have. So it's been really cool to see him get back on the court, and hopefully this wrist injury doesn't last too long, because, I think the Bulls on-off split with him on the court versus when he sits is like plus 25 points per 100 possessions. He's just such an impact player.
Is he in the long-term plans? Like, is this hope that like, oh, we get him back and then we extend him, or is this what is his future in Chicago?
I think just generally the future in Chicago is a little up for debate and up in the air at this point. Obviously they went with a younger team, but they didn't want to just like load up on draft picks. They wanted young veterans who know how to play the game, who can be competitive, but also have upside and room to grow. So, Lonzo, he's 27 years old. Like he doesn't not fit with that. But certainly with his injury history, I just don't know that you can bank on him as being like a foundational piece for a team. So to me, he makes more sense, on a team like the Knicks, where you don't have to be, a foundational player. You can just come in and play a role. And so I think ultimately, like his future is probably not with the Bulls. It also wouldn't surprise me if they, brought him back on a contract that was reasonable and had injury protections in it, just because he's been taking up such a big portion of the cap and not being able to play. And so I could see it going either way, but a $20 million expiring salary for a player who could really help a playoff team, I think would be an asset to the Bulls. So, at a certain point, I think the Bulls are going to have to decide, are we packing it in and going for Cooper Flag, or are we going to really do this play-in thing for a 4th straight year? And depending on, where they come to with that decision, I think that will influence what happens with Lonzo. And then also, like, our team's really going to give you that much for a guy that just may get hurt and not be able to play. I wouldn't expect them to get a ton back for him, but I also think that, they should be exploring all avenues in terms of ways that they can set themselves up for the future.
Well, you mentioned about whether you pivot to go all in for Cooper Flag or go for the play-in. The state of the Eastern Conference, you might be able to win 30 games and still make the play-in this conference. Like I was doing the numbers before the season, like your preseason predictions, and like doing all the win totals, and it's like the Hawks might win 37, 38, maybe even 40. Like I really love what I've seen from Dyson Daniels so far this year.
He's been awesome.
And after that, there's a drop off to where is there going to be like a 30-win team in the play-in? Or is there going to be tanking teams, quote unquote, that end up with a 10 seed? Just because I don't see, like, I think I picked the Raptors before the season as my 10 seed, and that doesn't look smart. The Bulls could win 28 games, and it might be the most of all the tanking teams. So you may end up with a 1-game elimination, which, that'd be interesting if like the dream scenario as a hater again is you beat the Hawks and you send Trae Young home in that matchup, and then you play the Heat, and then Spoelstra forgets how many timeouts he has again, and you win another game on your way to an 8th seed, and then we'll see what happens against the Celtics. But getting a lottery pick and a playoff berth would obviously be the best case scenario for the Bulls this season.
Oh my God. I think that would be like their dream come true.
The dream, like, exactly. The likeliness is
competitive throughout the season, sell that excitement and like, oh, we've got these young players that are playing well. We're going to be in the play-in. Maybe Kobe puts up another 40-point game against the Hawks this year, and then you lose, but you get to keep that top 10 protected pick because, there's 8 teams in the East who are worse than, the 13th worst team in the Western Conference. And so I think that's gonna be a really tough, like the Bulls, like I said, top 10 protected pick going to the Spurs. So what they should be doing is ensuring that they are the 6th worst team at worst or at best, so that they guarantee that they don't fall out of the top 10 in the lottery. Because if you finish as the 9th worst team in the league, and even if you make the play-in, but 2 teams jump you, now you've just had kind of an underwhelming season, and you also don't have your draft pick. And that would be the worst nightmare. So that is a very fine line, but you could totally see the Bulls front office just being too tantalized by, another shot at play-in glory so that they, can sell that to the fan base and then miss out on the draft pick that, this is not a situation where this is the 2024 draft and like there's nobody that's really that exciting. Like there are some real franchise changing players, and I think they know that that's what they need, but are they willing to do what is necessary to get there? We will see.
Play-in glory.
Play-in glory, baby.
Bravo to the NBA. They created a thing that isn't real, and that's a thing that front offices can absolutely point to and be like, we're going for the play-in, fans. Like we made the play-in this year. I'm not even trying to like speak disparagingly about the Bulls. It's just,
it's true. I think it's
like that's
like
a thing.
In the West. It's an accomplishment to make the play-in because there's so many good teams, and those games are exciting. And like you could convince yourself that a LeBron-led 7th seed play-in team could make the conference finals or the finals because it's the Lakers. But like that's not the case in the East. These teams are so bad, and like they're all so bad. So it's not like the Bulls are deluding themselves into thinking, well, maybe we're close enough. It's like they actually are, because none of these teams are good. And so I think you just have to keep your eyes on the prize and focused on what is actually most important. But when it comes down to actually doing that, I think it could be more challenging to convince yourself to go that direction.
Yeah, I had forgotten about the pick protections too. That it's top. Their pick goes to San Antonio. It's top 10 protected. So even if like the scenario I painted of the play-in to the 8th seed, while also being a lottery team, is in play, you do run the risk of like you said, 2 teams, 1 team jumping you, and then suddenly the 11th pick in the draft is headed to San Antonio in a loaded draft. So
the line between those 2 things is so small.
It is.
And it's almost like out of your control at that point. So do you take control of your destiny and put yourself in a position to potentially get a franchise changing player, or do you do it the other way? And I don't know if you can really straddle that line. But I just don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to go to the live chat watching with us live. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of the Pregame Pod Live. We start with Knicks Film School staple Jessica, who says, New York City pizza, greater than Chicago deep dish pizza. Let's go, Knicks. Your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, New York City pizza is way better. I will say this, though. Chicago tavern style pizza is really the pizza of Chicago, and that is fantastic. So if you are a New Yorker on your way to Chicago, that's what I would recommend. But deep dish is just not, it's a separate thing.
I think we were expecting a lot more pushback and hostility, and you conceded
No,
immediately, Will.
it's correct. It's correct. New York pizza
It's
is
correct.
fantastic.
Love to see it. Jessica also says IT is the deep dish pizza, quote unquote. But Wax Tracks, Touch and Go, Chess, VJ Records, etc. are responsible for the best music ever. Prop Chicago, but let's go Knicks. So you win the music scene, but you lose the pizza scene, it sounds like. So
You guys got to try tavern style. I'm telling you.
So it should shock nobody how much of a pizza aficionado I am. I lived down south for 6 years in college, like in my 20s, where there's just no pizza that's good whatsoever. And returning back home to New York just gave me a greater appreciation for the New York style of it all. And I used to hear like, oh, it's the water, it's the style. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Then I left and it's like, oh my gosh, it's awful. And came back and it's like the water, the style. Like I get it.
It's
now,
the same with bagels. They're just not the same anywhere other than New York.
100. You're earning a lot of points here with our audience. Well done, sir. Dom Cappuccini with the super chat. Thank you, Dom. Is Kobe White part of the long-term future plans? What would be a return for Levine he's got multiple questions. What would a return for Levine be that Bulls fans could live with at this point? Good luck with the future, but not tonight. LOL.
I like that one. So yeah, Kobe, I think his future is a little bit up in the air. If it were up to me, I would probably be looking to trade him right now because he's making, mid-level exception money. He's way outperforming his contract and he's got, a year and a half left on a deal. And so a team who is kind of in a tight situation cap wise could take him in pretty cheaply. And that could really net the Bulls some draft picks, which is, I think, what they really need to be going for. I don't think the Bulls are going to be ready to move him. I think they're going to do the same thing with Caruso and kind of wait until after the peak of his value and then decide. But he's also, 24 years old. I'm not going to kill him for not moving on from him in the way that they passed on Caruso, because Caruso was 30. You need to extend him and you're not going anywhere anyway. So I could see them thinking Kobe is a foundational piece of the future. But I think a lot of that depends on how he performs throughout the rest of this year. As for Zach, I think Bulls fans are pretty much ready to move on from Zach if they can just not have to give up picks to do it or not take back worse salary to do it. To me, I just don't know if you're going to be able to move $43 million midseason because of the new cap rules. It's just very difficult, and there aren't a lot of teams that can actually make that work. But I think the Bulls are at a point where they kind of know, or the Bulls fans are at a point where they kind of know the team is trending this direction. Zach has been great, and it's been great to see him get back to, his former self. And I think that the narrative and just, the way people talked about him went way too far. He's obviously a very talented player, but at the same point, they are going a different direction, and it's a direction that he doesn't really necessarily fit with. So I think anything that puts them in a position to have more cap space or have more picks moving forward, that would be huge. But I just don't think the Bulls are going to move him if they have to attach a pick to do so.
Winter Fox says, and I don't know if you agree with the suggestion, but we'll see. The Bulls should probably trade Vooch while his value is peak. Last I checked, he was shooting 45% from three this season.
He's been unreal. And it's kind of crazy that last year he shot 29% on threes. This year, last I looked, he was over 48 or 47%. It might have
46.8 is the official number. Yes, which is still insane.
Obviously that's not going to sustain. And so, you want to move him when his value is highest. But it's kind of the same situation for me as Zach, where, he's obviously a great player, former All-Star. He's playing some of his best basketball that he's played with the Bulls right now. And so, it depends on what direction the team wants to go. But I think his deal is a lot more manageable to move, only $20 million this year, and one more year on it, as opposed to Zach having 3 more years, including this one. So I could see the Bulls moving on from him, but I also could see them wanting to keep him because the way that he plays, I think, is really helping some of the younger players. He's a good ball mover. He's a great screener. He's a great rebounder. And so what he does, I think, can have a positive impact on the younger players more so than Zach, who's obviously, more of a scorer, more of kind of getting his own. And Zach's been great, and he's playing more to the style that the Bulls want to play. But to me, Vooch is a player that can help develop some of the younger talent on the team, which is ultimately what the Bulls want to do.
So last one, and just your call. Blood of the Panther. Lonzo for campaign. Who says no? The salary cap. That's who says no.
The salary cap, and I think campaign did have a stint with the Bulls. He was one of
Who
the
has it? He has had
yeah.
a stint with at this point. Yeah.
For some reason, Bulls fans just absolutely could not stand him, and so I think a lot of Chicago would say no to that one.
Yeah, obviously the Blood of the Panthers kidding. I do think there's like a Mitch plus campaign for and whatever pick the Knicks have left. Now they have some seconds. They have a swap in 2030, and they have this Washington pick, which gotta just say, like, when they made this draft night trade a couple years ago with the Thunder, they traded the 11th overall pick to the Thunder for 3 future firsts, and they were all protected. There was this Milwaukee pick that was top 5 protected, which was this year. There's this Washington pick that's protected top 10 or top 11 or lottery protected, whatever it is, it's protected long enough for when Washington's competent again. It will be 2 seconds. Like, it's probably going to be 2 seconds. And this Detroit pick that like started off top 13 protected, then went to top 11, then goes to top 11, then goes to top 9. And we were like, it's probably going to be in 2 seconds by the time Detroit turns things around. And everybody was like, oh, those picks aren't going to matter. Milwaukee's going to be like a whatever seed and forever. That like, even when that pick converts, it's going to be like the 28th pick in the draft. And you basically got 4 seconds when you could have just taken someone at 11. Funny how perception changes now that Milwaukee pick looks amazing, because it might end up being like the top, like an 11th pick or a 15th pick, depending on what they are this year. And after the Cat trade was done, the Detroit pick is the one that went out. Everybody like, oh, that Detroit pick's not as bad as you think. It could end up being a pretty good. It's like, no, it's going to be 2 seconds. And that's probably what the Knicks traded. It was Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo in 2 seconds, which, like, it's probably a fine and okay trade. So I just had to get that out. Like, realizing what the perception of picks and perception that changes because the Knicks are involved, just it bugs me sometimes.
That's what the Bulls did with the Lowry marketing trade. They traded Lowry to the Cavs in a 3-team trade. It got them the Blazers lottery protected pick. This was in 2021, and it was protected through 2028. And it's like, that's just going to be 2 seconds or 1 second, I think.
Yeah.
So people got to wrap their mind around that one.
Bingo. Last thoughts on the game before tonight, going into this one.
I think the Knicks on a back-to-back going against the Bulls with their pace, that could be a challenge. But, the Bulls are a little friskier than I thought they were going to be. They are, obviously talented team. And so if they're making their shots, I think they'll keep it close. But like the Knicks should out-talent them and out-execute them, especially if this game is close down the stretch. I think that's where the Bulls can really struggle, when they don't really have someone they can give it to create a good look, whether it's for themselves or somebody else. So my guess would be Knicks win. I don't know what the line is saying right now, but I do think the Bulls are, competitive enough to keep it close. And a lot of it just depends on, turnovers and shot making, as I said before.
I was trying to go as fast as I could to get the line for tonight, but ESPN changed down around their schedule thing, so that way the most recent game is now at the bottom of the screen rather than it used to be at the top of the screen. Right.
Knicks opened -9.5, and now it's down to -8.5. So should be pretty comfortable.
I don't hate hoping the Knicks win. Knicks fans, not trying to preach against it. I don't hate a Chicago cover tonight.
Okay.
I just putting that out there. I don't hate a Chicago cover tonight. And for the total, that feels low too. This feels like 125, 115 is the final. There's 2 teams with one team with pace, one team that puts the ball on the court. The one puts the ball in the hoop. Anyway, shout out to our friends at BetUS. That's where you should go to. That's what I would recommend. Although this technically the show isn't brought to you by them, but shout out to our friends at BetUS. Or if you're listening on the audio feed, shout out to DraftKings. Will, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show live. Before you get out of here, please tell me where they can find you and all the things at the CHGO Podcast Network.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Will_Gottlieb. I just migrated over to Blue Sky too, so you can find me at Will Gottlieb there. But yes, CHGO Sports on YouTube. We do our daily Bulls show 5 days a week, covering the team, pregame, postgame, all of it. And then I write for our site at allchgo.com.
There you go. Thank you, Will, as always, for joining me. And thank you to everybody for tuning in for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dig the show, head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, remember to subscribe. I'll be back to preview both of these Nets games. I'm still confirming our guest and confirming whether it will be live or not. But I will have a guest later on this week to look at both Nets games. First look at little brother since the blockbuster trade this half season. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I'll speak with you soon. Peace.